Bueno, bienvenidos todos. Muchas gracias por conectarse. Este es nuestro tour virtual al Rancho Atterholt. Yo soy María Fernanda Omafe Báez, gerente de marketing para Certified Angus Beef para Latinoamérica y el mercado multicultural en Estados Unidos. Para empezar, vuelvo y les recuerdo, por favor, silencien sus micrófonos con el fin de que todos podamos escuchar claramente a nuestros presentadores. Les recomendamos también en la esquina superior derecha, en la parte donde dice View, que seleccionen Speaker View para que puedan ver el tour virtual en toda la pantalla. Para el tour virtual de hoy tenemos disponible para ustedes la opción de traducción simultánea. Para aquellos que quieran o deseen escuchar el tour virtual en español, por favor les sugiero vayan al icono de traducción y hagan clic en español. Para quienes quieran escucharlo en el idioma inglés, también pueden ir al icono de traducción y escoger el idioma inglés. En este caso, nosotros les sugerimos que seleccionen el canal en español, ya que este es un rancho de pie de cría y la terminología que vamos a utilizar aquí es muy específica de la industria de la carne, así que es una recomendación. Sin embargo, tienen disponible el canal en inglés también para quienes quieran escucharlo en inglés. Previamente se les envió un glosario de términos de la industria de la carne para que lo tengan a la mano, ya que, como les decía, durante el tour se van a mencionar algunos de estos términos. Si por alguna razón no recibieron este documento, en el chat van a encontrar un link que ya les voy a poner para que puedan descargar este archivo. Por favor, los invito a que realicen preguntas durante todo el tour. No se queden con ninguna duda. Además, vamos a tener premios al final, entonces los invito a que hagan las preguntas en el chat, por favor. Nuevamente bienvenidos y espero disfruten de este tour virtual por el rancho de la familia Atterholt. Los dejo con Ivette.
Muchísimas gracias, Mafe, y nuevamente muy buenos días a todos. Mi nombre es Ivette Cortés y soy gerente para la región de Latinoamérica para la marca. Y es un placer contar con su presencia en este tour al rancho de pie de cría, una experiencia virtual que les permitirá aprender de este tipo de operación ganadera. Junto con la familia Atterholt aprenderemos las diferentes actividades que día a día se llevan a cabo en su propiedad y el manejo que dan al ganado. Pero antes de empezar con nuestra sesión, le voy a ceder la palabra al señor Roberto Gómez, gerente de desarrollo comercial de Sigma Foodservice, quien nos dirigirá un mensaje. Adelante, Roberto.
Hola, muchas gracias, Ivette. ¿Qué tal? Gracias a todos por acompañarnos. La verdad es que me da mucho gusto que podamos estar aquí de manera virtual. Nos hubiera gustado que fuera presencial, pero estamos seguros que de cualquier forma le van a encontrar mucho provecho y utilidad a lo que vamos a ver el día de hoy. Como saben, para Sigma Foodservice es súper valioso y es un honor tener a un grupo de clientes tan privilegiados como ustedes. Sigma Foodservice siempre se esfuerza por estar teniendo las mejores marcas, los productos más relevantes, lo que ustedes necesitan, estar siempre con las nuevas tendencias y estarles ofreciendo los mejores productos. Es por eso que una marca como CAB, una marca reconocida, la marca líder en calidad de res, refleja mucho ese compromiso y esos valores que tenemos como Sigma Foodservice. Así que esto es una oportunidad de que puedan conocer todo lo que hay detrás de la marca, para que vean desde el rancho, desde dónde inicia, por qué es diferente la marca, por qué tiene esa calidad, esa consistencia, que es lo que ustedes siempre buscan en la industria food service. Siempre hablamos de calidad, consistencia, funcionalidad, y qué mejor que una marca como CAB, de la mano de Sigma Foodservice, que les puede garantizar ese sabor, jugosidad y suavidad, que es lo que siempre buscan en un platillo cárnico. Gracias a todos por estar aquí y espero que disfruten mucho la sesión.
Gracias, Roberto, por ese mensaje tan bueno. Creo que no lo pude yo expresar en mejores palabras y siempre trabajamos de la mano con Sigma Foodservice, quien es nuestro distribuidor líder, ¿sí?, en México, y quien lleva pues, muchos productos novedosos y siempre está a la vanguardia de todo lo que requiere la industria de food service. Bueno, el día de hoy nuestra presentadora es la señora Mandy Atterholt, copropietaria del rancho Atterholt, un rancho de pie de cría en Jeromesville, Ohio. Además, Mandy trabaja para la marca Certified Angus Beef en el equipo de educación como gerente de experiencia. Mandy con su familia ha abierto las puertas de su operación en el pasado a todos nuestros socios comerciales de la marca, para así transmitir su conocimiento y pasión por lo que hacen. Las raíces de la marca Surf Angus Beef desde el principio se han encontrado en la ganadería, esa comunidad de ganaderos que han trabajado durante generaciones para asegurar un buen manejo de los animales y así asegurar la entrega de un producto de alta calidad como es la marca Surf Angus Beef. El día de hoy estará Mandy presentando y hablándonos acerca de todo lo que hace en su operación. Nuevamente, muy buenos días a todos y los dejo con Mandy.
Buenos días, mi nombre es Mandy Atterholt y estoy muy contenta de tenerlos aquí y poder hacer este tour virtual en mi rancho.
Hi, and welcome to Atterholt Farms. My name is Mandy Atterholt. This is my husband, Aaron, and these are our 3 kids. This is Claire, this is Natalie, and this is Tyler. And also, every farm has a farm dog, and this is our Murphy. Today we're at the farm where Aaron and I and our family lives. Our farm is a partnership between our family and Aaron's brother Mike and his wife Mandy and their 2 kids, Macy and Callie.
So the farm we were standing on right here today, my brother and I bought from our grandparents 12 years ago. Grandma actually lives in the farmhouse. She's 89 years old. We refer to her here as great grandma because the kids, they get to walk up and see her every day. So that's pretty cool being able to live right here with grandma on this farm. The farm where my brother and his family lived was actually belonged to our great grandparents, Mike and I's great grandparents. Pretty cool that we have the opportunity to live on the farms here that our past generations have raised our mom and dad, or our family on. Mike and I, we got started in this cattle business back when we were in 4-H and FFA. That's how we really got started. Showing market steers probably when we were 12 years old. And you know, as we got older, we got to thinking, well, maybe it'd be nice to raise our own calves instead of buying steers. We bought a couple bred cows. They weren't Angus. They actually were Simmental cattle, but we each bought a cow for an FFA project when we were in FFA. I was probably in 9th grade. And so that's kind of how we got started. It was a project, and today we're up to 120 head of Angus cattle. So now we're starting to see this whole thing come full circle with our kids. Mike's oldest daughter is actually showing market steers. This will be her 2nd year in 4-H, and the younger ones are what they call clover buds in 4-H. So Claire's a clover bud, Natalie's a clover bud, and Mike's youngest daughter, Callie's a clover bud. So we're starting the whole cycle over again.
It's really neat for us to see our kids getting involved with things now. They're the 5th generation in our family to be involved with this operation. So we're just really glad to live this lifestyle and be here and expose them to the opportunities that are here. We're really excited that you guys are with us today and that we can expose you and show you a little bit of our lifestyle in the farm here. We're a seed stock operation, which means we are kind of the very beginning of the beef cattle supply chain. There are different segments in the beef cattle industry, and a seed stock producer would be the very first segment of the industry. So we're trying to focus on raising cattle with really high genetics. The second segment of the beef cattle industry would be what we call a commercial producer. That commercial producer would come to a farm like ours or another seed stock operation, and they would buy animals that are registered Angus animals with high quality genetics in the form of bulls or heifers or cows. A commercial producer is going to use those genetics and breed their cattle, and then they're going to have their own calf crop. Those calves from the commercial producer would then go to a feed yard where they would be fed to maturity until they're ready to be harvested. We've got some chores to do this morning, so come along with us and take a look at what we do every day.
You ready to go?
Let's go.
Come on.
Come on.
Come on.
Come on, Murph. So when we're talking about diets, the cattle diet, when you're talking about a mama cow, she's basically going to consume forage, which would be grass or hay that we make during the summer to feed during the winter. Or, you know, we can roll hay out when it gets dry, when the pastures run short, and we feed hay. So basically a cow is on a forage diet. Now say if we're feeding a steer, or we're trying to grow a bull or heifer and get them developed, you know, that's when we're going to introduce a diet with some energy in. So we'd use corn and spelts and things like that, plus supplement it with protein, which usually comes in a pelleted form for us, but it's almost always derived from a soybean. So those are basically things that are grown here in the Midwest where we're at. Corn, soybeans, it all ends up in our cattle's diet.
We're a diversified operation, which is common here in the Midwest. So in addition to our Angus cow herd, we also raise about 800 acres of crops, primarily consisting of corn, soybeans, wheat, and hay. A lot of those crops we sell for a cash crop, but a percentage of them we do use right here on the farm for the feed for the cattle. Our goal here is to raise really high quality Angus cattle with genetics that are something that a commercial producer would want to come here and purchase from us. We can do that with a combination of three things. The first one being animal nutrition, the second one being animal care and management, and the third one being the genetics that we use. With a combination of those three things and us doing our job to take care of these cattle, we can produce a really high end product in the form of bulls and females that a commercial producer would want to come here and purchase from us.
So some of the things we do around here as far as the genetic end of it is we're always constantly measuring and keeping track of our data. You know, when the calves are born, as soon as they're on the ground, we weigh them. So we have a birth weight. You know, then when we wean them, we take a weight. We can track back and see which cows and cow herds or cow families are more productive going off their weaning weight. You know, a lot of the guys that we sell bulls to sell feeder calves, and they sell them by the pounds. You know, they're going to want a bull that's going to produce more pounds. So when they wean their calves, they've got a heavier calf. You know, then when it's a year old, we would take yearling weights. So, you know, we've got a lot of different things we can do. And some of the more scientific things we can do is ultrasound. When our heifers and bulls are a year old, on top of the weighing them, we'll have the ultrasound tech come here to the farm, and she'll take measurements of their ribeye, back fat, and things like that. You know, so we can get a measurement of their carcass without actually having to harvest the animal to see all that. Also, we do a lot of genetic testing.
Genetic testing is in the form of either a blood sample or a tissue sample. So we can collect that from the day a calf is born, and we can send that into a lab and get the analysis back.
You know, so when we take the DNA sample, the tissue sample, and have it analyzed, we can get as much data off that one sample as if we'd kept a cow for 9 years and recorded her progeny. In basically a week's time, we can have 9 years worth of information.
So that puts us years ahead in a short amount of time, because we always say that our youngest cattle should be our highest quality. If we're doing our jobs right, every year that we have a calf crop, they should get better and better quality. So if we can help collect that data and analyze it, we can make a 7-year step in 1 year instead of actually waiting through 7 years worth of raising cattle. So things are always busy on the farm. Just to kind of walk you through a calendar year for us, we typically have all of our calves calving in January, February, and March. After calving season is over, we start to think about spring planting. And then we also breed the cows back in that time also, because we want those mama cows to have a calf the same time of year the following year. So we get into planting season and breeding season for the cows. We spend our summer baling hay and straw, and we try to put up a lot of feed to last us through the upcoming winter, because when our growing season ends, the cattle don't quit eating. So we need to prepare and store up food for them so that we can last through the winter here in Ohio. Once we get into fall, we start thinking about weaning calves. We start thinking about harvesting all the crops that we've planted. And then when winter comes, we start thinking about calving all over again. So it's a continuous cycle for us. There's never really any downtime. We're always kind of thinking ahead and what are we doing now, but what's right around the corner.
Pretty simple, right? She makes it sound so easy, but my brother and I, we're constantly, thinking ahead, are we gonna have enough hay to get through the winter? If it doesn't rain, what are we gonna do? So we've got different options, that we could try to produce extra forage. This year after we harvested the wheat and baled the straw, we planted some sorghum Sudan grass and some forage oats where our wheat was at, just anticipating that it might get dry and there might be a feed shortage in our local area here, so we've been pretty fortunate ourselves. I think we've got plenty of feed coming out of summer here, and things are looking pretty good. So, we might be able to capitalize on the forage shortage and actually maybe sell some forage to some local neighbors that may be short. So it's just, we're constantly always trying to think ahead and think about, how we can maybe generate some cash flow. There's all kinds of different things we can do. So maybe selling some hay this winter when other people are short might help us out.
So while he's thinking about doing that and feeding the cows, I just take care of the kids and try to make sure they're fed and bathed at least once a week. So I didn't really grow up on a farm. My goal throughout college was to marry a rich farmer. He always tells me I got it half right.
I'm not a farmer. I'm actually really rich.
Yeah, right.
I'd work a lot longer hours if my wife would let me, but typically I get up around 5:30 every morning and try to head out and get some chores done before everybody else gets out of bed. And I'll come back in when she's ready to go to work, or if I need to get kids on the school bus or out the door to the babysitter, and then, take care of that and get back at doing whatever work needs done for the day. But, typically it's sun up to sundown.
It's hard work. It's long days and long hours. There's, days where I'm yelling at him, trying to get him to come in and eat supper before 9 o'clock at night, because I know the kids still need a bath and they're ready for bed and he hasn't quit for the day yet. So there's definitely challenges to raising our kids here with the cattle on the farm. But we love this lifestyle, and there's really no way else we'd rather be doing it, or no place else we'd rather be. Our kids are with us most of the time, as long as we can keep them with us and it's safe, and they're learning a lot of things, and they seem to be pretty interested in this lifestyle at a young age. So kind of our goal is that we hope they grow up in this and learn to love it like we do, and maybe they'll take over someday.
I'm waiting for the day where I can sit on the porch, drink a beer, and point and tell them what to do. So I don't know if we'll ever get there or not, but that's my goal.
So in this barn is where we do a lot of our cow work. So this setup here that you can see really allows us to do that.
Not only is this safe for the cattle, it allows us to be safe too. We do all of our vaccinations. Anything gets sick and needs a shot or something like that, we run them in here, we can take care of them.
This is also where we run the cattle when we pull the DNA samples, and we put them in here to collect the ultrasound data when we have the tech come right out here to the farm.
So if you look at the way the system's set up, the cattle, they enter up here and they want to come around. We notice the nice gentle curve. Cattle do not like to get pushed into a corner. You hear that fight or flight, so that nice round curve allows them to make a turn.
When we put them in this piece right here, we call this the chute. We have a headlock up here. So what that does is that kind of catches them right behind the animal's head and their neck area. It doesn't choke them or anything like that. It's not actually squeezing their neck, but it's a small enough gap so that their shoulders can't fit through. So that kind of keeps them in here and keeps them secure. So they're not going to go anywhere. That allows them to kind of settle down. They know they're safe in that system.
These cattle are weighed a lot, and they don't even know they're being weighed when they come through. That's just one of the benefits of having a setup like this.
The scale is a platform in these gates here. So they step on it and they don't even realize they're on a scale. They just think they're walking through this system. Then we have a digital monitor that we can quickly grab that weight and write it down. We vaccinate all of the animals here on our farm to try to prevent illness later on. Our philosophy on that is if we can keep those animals healthy from birth on up, we can avoid treating them for illnesses later on in life. Well, we're done in this part of the tour. Let's go out and check out where the cows spend most of their day. Here we are on the last stop on our tour today. So as you can see behind us, the cows are out on the grass and the pasture, just enjoying the sunshine. Sustainability is always a goal that's at the top of mind for us here. For us to run a successful business model and hopefully be able to someday pass this farm on to our kids. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. We really had fun with you here on the farm, and we hope you enjoyed this farm tour. We really appreciate everything that you do to sell and market certified Angus beef. It really benefits us here on our farm in Ohio, as well as farmers and ranchers just like us all across the country.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye. Wait, bye-bye.
All right, well, thank you for watching that video, and I'm going to turn it over to Mafe. I think there are a couple questions in the chat, so Mafe, if you could read those to me.
Así es, Mandy. Martín Ríos tiene una pregunta. En una engorda de este tipo, ¿qué calidad de carne predomina como producto terminado?
Great question. So as you saw in the video, we are primarily a seed stock producer. So our main goal at our farm is not to put cattle into the feedlot. However, as you guys know, there's always an exception to every rule, and all farms are that way. They're not, all exactly the same. They all have unique things about them. So we do have one barn where we put cattle that are in kind of that feedlot scenario. Those are the ones that are not going to go on to be used for breeding stock. So for instance, some bull calves that we don't want to use for breeding, we will castrate those. Then they are steers at that time after they're castrated, or some heifers, which are the females that we don't want to put back into the herd or sell to somebody else. Those will also go into our feedlot barn. So in a typical year, we would feed about 50 or 60 head of cattle in that barn. Sometimes we even purchase some calves to put in there. We're pretty fortunate where we are in Ohio. There's a very, very small local packing plant that is near us, where we have all of those animals processed. So we are fortunate to get a lot of that carcass data back. Typically we're 60–70% certified Angus beef, probably about 20 to 30% prime, and high choice. We have not had anything fall below that high choice mark for quite a handful of years now. So that is something that we are pretty proud of, and always, of course, striving to get better, but feel like through those genetics and through the diet that we are feeding the animals is what really has allowed us to get to that point. Great question. Mafe, is there another question in there?
Así es, tenemos otra pregunta. ¿Cuántas cabezas de ganado se logran cada año o cada cuánto tiempo hay nacimientos?
Sure. So our herd size is about 120. And when we say that number 120, we are referring to the number of mama cows that we have. So those are females that are bred into production. So they are going to have calves this year. So actually right now in January and then throughout the next month or so into February and March, we are in what we call our calving season. So all 120 of those females are going to have a calf. Right now I think we're up to like 20 or 25 that we've had born so far. So we've got a ways to go yet, but we are well into the process of calving. So the reason that we have all of those calves born at the same time of year is because that fits our cycle of production. We want that like 70 to 80 day calving window so that we can have all of those females on a regimented yearly cycle. It just makes it easier for us if we are not calving year round. Couple different reasons. We're also crop farmers, as you saw in the video. So when it gets to spring and summer, we will turn our attention to the crops. And then all summer long, we are baling hay and putting up feed for the cattle. But that's kind of common in the beef industry, that a lot of the calves are born in kind of that calving window. That keeps things consistent for us. Another reason that we have our calves born at that within that window is because right now, about every 2 to 3 hours, my husband and my brother-in-law will wake up, they'll go outside and they just do a quick herd check. So they are walking through all of the cows and checking on them. You know, last night, for instance, Aaron went out at about 3:30. He went to walk through all the calves. And at 3:48 this morning, I got a text message and said, hey, can you come out here and help me? So we just always like to keep our eyes on the cows when they're in that window of opportunity for calving, just so that we can make sure they deliver those calves and everything goes right. If for some reason something would go wrong, we want to catch it right away so that we can be there to help and make sure we don't lose a calf. That's our ultimate goal. So we don't want to be waking up every 2 to 3 hours all year round to be going outside to be doing those herd checks. We like to contain that to about a 2 or 3 month window. So great question. I hope I answered that for you.
Mandy, tenemos aquí otra pregunta. Bueno, tenemos varias preguntas. La siguiente sería, ¿hacen uso de la inseminación artificial?
Yes, we do artificial insemination. So what that means, if you are not familiar with that process, is when we want to get our females bred, our heifers and our cows, we actually buy straws of semen there are semen companies that buy and raise these bulls. So we are able to buy straws of semen and then manually place it into the female's reproductive tract. The benefits of artificial insemination are it allows us to have access to the best Angus genetics in the world without having to own that animal. For instance, there might be, you know, a really good quality Angus bull that's worth, you know, $1 million. For about $20, I could buy a straw of semen, and that would be good for one breeding to one animal at our farm. So it's not a cheap process to artificially inseminate, but it is much more economical for us to do that than to actually purchase that bull. We wouldn't want to purchase the bull because after a couple years, we couldn't use that bull anymore. We have to pay very close attention to the bloodlines and the family trees of our cattle and those pedigrees and how many generations they go back. So we have to change up our sires every couple years to make sure that we're not breeding a cow to her dad or her brother. So artificial insemination works really good for us. We utilize that in all of our females. We typically will artificially inseminate each female, and then we can't tell right away if we get her bred with that artificial insemination or not. So what we do is we wait about 21 days, and if she comes back into heat, we know that we didn't get her bred. We'll try a second time to breed her via artificial insemination. And then we wait another 21 days, and hopefully we get them bred the second time. After that second time that we AI or artificially inseminate, if we don't get all of the cows bred, then we put in a bull and we allow natural mating to happen. And usually that'll get 100% of the cattle bred when they're in a pasture with the bull. And the reason we do that after about 2 tries is because, remember, I talked about that calving window being between 2 and 3 months long. Every heat cycle that those cows go through is about 3 weeks long. And so if we keep waiting and waiting and waiting and try to AI them and we don't get them bred, eventually our calving window is going to get to be longer than we want it to be. So it makes sense for us after about 2 tries to put that bull in. So we call that bull the cleanup bull. And his sole job is to get all of those females that aren't bred when he's in with them. So typically we're about 70 or 80% successful with our artificial insemination. Some years it's better than others. It's just kind of one of those things that fluctuates a little bit, but I'd say on average anywhere between 60 and 70% is a good success rate with artificial insemination. It's a tricky process because you have to watch the heat cycles of the cows, and you have to have the timing right when you artificially inseminate. For instance, if we, in the spring, in our breeding season, if we see a female is in heat that morning, we will need to breed her that night with artificial insemination. If we see that night that there are some other cows in heat, we know that the following morning we need to artificially inseminate those other cows. So when you see a female come into heat about 12 hours later is when that timing is optimum to place that semen into her reproductive tract. So we don't get away from the farm very often because we're always having to watch those cattle and keep track of, you know, what they're doing and where they are, because we want to catch that timing when it's right. If we miss a heat cycle and miss a breeding opportunity, we're going to have to wait 21 days until she's back in heat again. So that was a great question.
Ok, aquí viene otra pregunta. Alejandro pregunta, veo que han combinado el pastoreo libre con la alimentación del corral. ¿Cuál es el índice de pasto de la pradera? ¿Qué área de tierra tienes para cada animal aproximadamente?
That is an awesome question. So that is something that I can answer. I can give you a number for us right here in Ohio, but just know that that is a very variable number. So when you travel to different parts of our country, different parts of the world, different places in your country, that number may be a bit different. For us here in Ohio, our stocking rate is about 2 acres per cow-calf pair. So if you think of how big an acre is, roughly about the size of a football field is 1 acre. So 2 football fields per cow per year. So that makes it a challenge for us as our herd grows. We have to have that pasture space in order for those cattle to be able to graze in those warm months. Of course, that grazing window doesn't necessarily apply in the winter months. Right now, right here in Ohio, we are in the thick of the winter season, so the grass isn't growing anyway. So right now we are having to feed our cattle hay, which we baled this past summer to kind of supplement, since the pasture grass is not growing right now. Right around May, the beginning of May, is when those grasses will start growing again. And at that point, we will be able to take the cows and the cows, calves, bulls that we have, and we'll be able to spread them out on pasture a little bit more to utilize that stocking and grazing. So that the seasons that we have here in Ohio really kind of limit you to when you can graze and when you can't. So we typically graze cattle here from the beginning of May through the end of October. So that leaves us a pretty big window during those winter months when we have to have feed stored up and take feed to the cattle. Great question. Mafe, are there any more questions in the chat?
Y seguimos con preguntas. Mandy, mira, ¿qué porcentaje de su ganado se elegirá para la marca Certified Angus Beef? ¿Qué tipo de desafíos tuvo que soportar al comienzo de la pandemia? ¿Crees que esta pandemia cambiará la forma en que los ganaderos familiares solían trabajar o procesar animales tratando de cumplir con las especificaciones de Certified Angus Beef?
Awesome question. So the first, I'll kind of go at that in a couple different ways. The first question, what percentage of our cattle go into a certified Angus beef box? The ones that we do feed out and send to harvest, getting up there close, probably between that 60, 70, 80% will make the certified Angus beef grade at the packing plant. The ones that don't are usually just short and fall into that high choice area. So that's something we are pretty proud of. As far as the pandemic and how it has affected us, it certainly has affected us, just as it in some way, shape, or form has found a way to affect everybody. For us, probably one of the biggest things we noticed is back in the spring when everything started, that was right around the time of year that we sell our bulls every year. So annually we sell about 20 yearling bulls. So those are bulls that have just reached the 1-year-old mark. And we sell them when they're about 14 or 15 months old. That is when they are mature and they can go to another farm and be used for breeding purposes. So when the pandemic started last year in March, by April, none of us knew what we know now, and everybody had a lot of hesitation. We weren't sure if this whole thing was going to last 1 or 2 months, and here we are now, almost a whole year later. So there was a lot of that unsure feeling, and people just didn't know. What we saw on the farm selling bulls last year is people were afraid to spend money. Typically a bull to purchase is right around that $3,000 mark. That's a pretty big investment for a producer to come and buy a bull, and that's a big check to write. So we saw a lot of people that just weren't sure if they needed to buy one or maybe wait another year. So last year we only sold about 15 bulls. The year before, to give you a little bit of comparison, the year before we sold, I think, about 22. And if we would have had another 6 or 8, we could have easily sold them the year before. So this past year, we had 6 or 8 that we just couldn't get sold. So that was, think about $3,000 a piece in 1 month for us. That was, roughly $20-some thousand that we anticipated on bringing in that we didn't get to bring in. So that was kind of unfortunate. On the flip side, we did have a steer barn. Our feedlot cattle were, you know, they were in high demand last year when the pandemic started and the grocery store shelves were bare. We had all kinds of people calling and asking if we had any freezer beef for sale. The problem was the little packing plant where we take the cattle to be harvested, like everywhere else, they were having a hard time keeping up with the demand as well. So, it was a crazy year. The bull sales were down. The amount of freezer beef that we sell to people was really high last year, and could have been higher had we had the animals, and if we would have had that ability to get them into the packing plant. So it's been a strange year for sure, not only just with the cattle. The commodities have, taken a toll too. Those prices fluctuate on a daily basis as far as the corn and the soybean prices. And as well as you guys all know, just the family dynamic of trying to, keep the farm going. Obviously, the farm never shut down. While I was working from home, everything still went on. My husband's job never changed. Those animals always had to be taken care of. So we never really quit. That was kind of the different aspect from a farmer's perspective as well. A lot of businesses shut down. A lot of people worked from home. We just kept having to do, what we always do with the cattle. For me personally, as a mom, it was pretty hard. The kids were home from school. We had a 1-year-old at the time. So it was just a lot to balance with, the stress of the farm and that part of it. And then all of a sudden these kids are home. Nobody knows what's going to happen with kids being in school and whatnot. So hopefully there's light at the end of the tunnel, and there's only one way to go, and that's up. So we are looking forward to hopefully this spring when we start selling those bulls, for people to start feeling a bit more confident and a little bit more at ease in making those purchases.
Mandy, tenemos otra pregunta de Claudia. Ella pregunta, ¿cuál es la edad ideal para sacrificar un animal para tener una buena calidad de carne? Y aprovecho también, hago una siguiente pregunta que nos hace Abner Mendoza. ¿Cuántos ranchos Certified Angus Beef hay? Sé que hay 24 ganaderos Angus, dice 25. De una vez, 2 preguntas para que respondamos. Gracias, Mandy.
Sure. So the optimum age that the animals are ready for market is going to be right around that 13 to 15 month window, as they're being grain finished. So when they're about 7 to 9 months old, we would wean those calves. That means we separate them from the cows, and we put them in that feedlot scenario. When they're in there, we're going to feed them that high energy grain diet. That is really going to help them develop the marbling, which is what we all love. That marbling is what turns into that juiciness and tenderness and flavor. So for us, that age that our cattle are ready to go to harvest is in that 13 to 15 month window of opportunity. When they go, they're probably weighing anywhere between 13 to 1,400 pounds. Would be their live animal weight when they're ready to go to harvest. As far as how many certified Angus beef farms are there, that's a great question. So a farm doesn't necessarily declare itself to be a certified Angus beef farm. All cattle, when they go to the packing plants, are graded by a USDA grader. And that grader is going to be the person who evaluates those carcasses to see if they meet the 10 specs for the certified Angus beef brand. So any farmer or rancher who is sending cattle to a packing plant that is a certified Angus beef licensed packing partner is eligible to to have cattle that qualify. The farmer or the rancher does not have to declare ahead of time whether they are raising cattle for the brand or not. It's really a performance-based evaluation that happens at the packing plant, and that is done by a neutral party. So that's done by the USDA grader. So it's not a certified Angus beef staff member that's making that call. It's not the farmer or rancher. It's not the packing plant. So that person doesn't really have any influence either way who's making the call on those cattle. So any farmer or rancher who is raising Angus cattle or Angus influenced cattle is eligible. So roughly 20-some thousand family farmers across the United States would be kind of a number that you could use as far as families that are contributing towards the brand.
Perfecto, Mandy. Tenemos más preguntas. ¿El ganado que se sacrifica es liviano o pesado? Y aprovecho también hago una pregunta más. ¿La operación del rancho es solo de la familia o también apoyan personas externas?
Great question. The first part of your question on the cattle that we are harvesting, heavy or light, the honest answer to that is we hope we're right in the middle. If the carcasses are light, we're missing an opportunity with them because we're selling them by the pound, and we're not going to be able to replace that calf until a year later. So our cows only have one calf per year, and then that calf lives over a year before it's ready to go to harvest. So if we're harvesting them too soon, we're kind of shooting ourselves in the foot, and we're not doing ourselves justice to let those animals grow and get to maturity and perform. On the flip side, if we're harvesting cattle that are too heavy, then we're wasting money because at a certain point of maturity, those animals are going to start putting fat on the exterior, and all of that fat, or most of that fat, is going to get trimmed away. So I don't want to be paying the feed bill to get those animals fatter and fatter, knowing that fat is just going to get trimmed off of the animal. So we kind of know by looking at the cattle, you can tell from the outside when they reach that prime finish, when it's their optimum time to go. You can tell by looking at a live animal too, whether he or she needs to stay on feed for a couple more weeks to get to their finished end point. So that's just kind of a skill that you learn when you're around cattle and you see them and you work with them. You can kind of tell if they're ready to go to the plant or not by looking at the outside and getting your hands on them. As far as employees on the farm, it is my husband, Aaron, and his brother, Mike, are the two brothers that are in partnership. Occasionally, I and my sister-in-law will help when they need us to, but we both work full-time off of the farm. And we also, help to take care of the kids when we get home. So it's a little bit hard for me to get outside and help sometimes when the kids are hungry and they need to be doing homework and that kind of thing. My father-in-law is a good help as well. He helps, do some trucking for us when it's, harvest time and it's time for us to be hauling grain to the local elevator. He's a great help. He'll also drive tractor for us in the summer. He'll help rake hay or bale hay. A lot of times it's a family affair when we are baling hay and making, big round bales in the summer. We load up the kids in the truck and Aaron will drive the tractor and I will drive the truck and trailer to pick up those bales from the field and haul them home. So we store the bales at home. We wrap them in plastic so they don't get rain and snowed on and get moldy. So after we bale all that hay in the summer, we have to haul it all home and wrap it. So my sister-in-law and I will help with those jobs. we try to do some of the book work and some of that kind of stuff, but we are a bit limited to what we can do during the days when we're not home. You know, when we have to take care of the kids. Our kids are still young enough right now. It's a little hard for us to have them in with us with the cattle just because they're little. We don't want anything to happen to them. So from a safety perspective, we've got to watch. Now my brother-in-law, Mike, and my sister-in-law and their kids, they're getting a little bit older. So their kids are getting to the point now where they're not so much of a safety risk. They can be in the pens and doing a little bit more. So hopefully we'll get there someday and we'll have some cheap or free labor around the farm. But with our kids, we're just not quite there yet. We sometimes will hire some help. We had a hired hand here for the last couple years, but he just left us a couple weeks ago to go to a different job opportunity. So right now it's truly just Mike and Aaron and my sister-in-law and I. So we'll help in the evenings. The kids will take out to the barn with us. We just make them stay outside of the pens, and so they're always watching and learning and playing in the barn while we try to get some things done.
Bueno, Mandy, y la última pregunta para ya hacer nuestro cierre. ¿A los cuántos partos se desechan las hembras?
That's a great question. So a heifer, which is a female calf, she will have her first calf when she's 2 years old. And then she'll have one every year after that. We keep them on that cycle. So it's not uncommon for us to get between 6, 8, maybe 10 calves out of one cow. That would take her about 8 or 10 or 12 years to get to that point. After a cow gets so old, she just starts to lose productivity. Her body's kind of worn out, and at that point we would replace her with a younger heifer that we would have born on the farm. Or maybe we go to a cattle sale from another farm or ranch and purchase some females to bring in. But for us, not uncommon to keep a cow probably on average about 10 years. And in that 10-year life at our farm, she would give us 8 calves. They typically just have a single calf when they do have babies. Every once in a while, they'll have a set of twins, but that's pretty rare. We might get a set or 2 of twins a year. There are some years that we don't get any twins. So we typically just count on 1 per animal per year after she reaches 2 years old. If for some reason that cow, we can't get her bred, or maybe she aborts a calf or something like that, we would get rid of her at that time, because if she's not going to give us a calf every year to sell, then we're just paying to feed her and she's simply a pet at that point. So that is something that we have to kind of watch. Those cows, they work hard for us and giving us those calves every year. So we take really good care of them because they do that for us. So great question.
Pues, Mandy, muchísimas gracias por todo tu tiempo y por todo ese conocimiento y pasión que tienes por lo que haces. Tú y tu familia son un pilar para la marca Surf Angus Beef. Y con esto concluimos la sesión del día de hoy, no sin antes agradecerles su presencia y sobre todo dejarles este conocimiento para que ustedes puedan estar más interesados y a lo mejor en un futuro, ¿sí? Mandy le encantaría abrir sus puertas y poder recibirlos ahí en el rancho que tiene con su familia. ¿Sí? Y esperamos poder verlos muy pronto en otra sesión con la marca Surf Angus Beef. Ha sido un placer por parte de todo nuestro equipo el tenerlos el día de hoy y esperamos verlos nuevamente, aunque sea virtualmente, y en un futuro el poder contar con su presencia. Que tengan un excelente día. Gracias.